Alright everyone, welcome. So let's again have a look at what's going on here. So we're given some information about these triangles here. We want to show that ABD and CBD are congruent here. Yet again, I ask that you pause the video so that you can try this proof out on your own. Okay? So let's go ahead and put this in here. We see what we have. This looks pretty well. So we have BD bisects ABC here. That looks like we're going to get a pair of angles like that. And I'm just going to mark them. AB is congruent to BC here. And it looks like we have BD's congruent to itself. Again, the fact that you have triangles overlapping each other, they share a side. That's going to be really helpful here. So it looks like we're going to use side angle side here. Okay. So now it's just a matter of assembling our thing here. Now actually I'm going to do this in, I'm going to write this as a paragraph here. You can do this in two-column form. I'm going to choose to write this as a paragraph here. So we can just mention, notice that the nice part about this is that this works very similar to what we did here yesterday. We just simply list everything out and I'll just mention everything. So in this case, we are given that AB is congruent to BC. And I'll mention that as a pair of sides. Okay. We are also given, now I'm going to introduce the angle, we are also given that BD bisects angle ABC. So thus, now we can use the definition. By the definition of angle bisector, we have angle ABD is congruent to angle CBD here, and that's a pair of angles. That's great. Okay. By the reflexive property, so we know that BD is going to be congruent to itself by reflexive property, so by the reflexive property, BD is congruent to itself. And that's our last pair of sides. Thus, we can say triangle ABD is congruent to triangle CBD here by side angle side. Okay? And you can see here, this proof works out really, really nicely. It's a very nice, short, and sweet proof here. Okay? So now, note that we can go ahead here. Let's take a look at the next part. There's a follow-up here. So the follow-up asks, if AD is 3x minus 6 and DC is x plus 10, compute x. Okay, so let me label that here. Now wait a minute. I don't know anything about what's going on here. This is a little bit confusing to me because we don't have this information here, right? And yet, well, let's see here. We know we've just shown that these two triangles are congruent here. So it kind of makes sense what's going on. We have, one of the things about congruent triangles, one of the definitions of congruent triangles is that all the corresponding parts are the same. So not only are the corresponding angles the same, but also corresponding sides are the same. And luckily, we can see that AD and DC here happen to be corresponding sides. The reason they're corresponding sides here, well, it's pretty straightforward. I've got one pair here, I've got another pair here, so I've got this third pair, so the last pair has to be corresponding. Another thing to note is that they're both actually opposite congruent angles here. So notice how ABD and CBD here are congruent. Both of these sides here are opposite those congruent angles, so we can actually conclude they must be congruent as well. So now, we can say in this situation, we can kind of do something like this here. So, we can say, so therefore we can mention that in this case, AD is, we have this, so we can set them equal to each other. So we go 3x minus 6 equals x plus 10 here. And we can go ahead and do the algebra here. So this looks pretty good. We get 2x minus 6 equals 10. So that looks 2x equals 16. So you get x, if I'm not mistaken, equal to 8 here, right? And that should work out pretty well. Now note here, we can very easily go ahead and add this to a proof here, right? We can actually show that AD and CD are congruent because we have congruent triangles here. So notice that we can have that, but we can also have other things here, right? I can show that this pair of angles here has to be congruent here, so this green pair of angles has to be congruent. I can also show this red pair of angles has to be congruent here, right? So we actually have a lot of things here. So note that we can actually show AD is congruent to CD here. So we can actually continue this proof. And I can say here, we can say that so we can actually say that AD is congruent to CD. And notice that I'm actually going to be using the statement in black here as a springboard to get us to the statement in blue. So we can say AD is congruent to CD since corresponding. So we know that the fact that these are congruent here is because they're corresponding and they're corresponding sides. So notice that this works with sides and angles here, so I'm just going to call them parts. We can say corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, so notice how this blue statement here, this blue reason corresponding pairs of congruent triangles are congruent, you're going to be using this a lot here. So I'm going to underline this here in red so we can see this stands out a little bit more. You're going to be using this over and over again. And indeed, when you try to show that two triangles are congruent, or when you try to use two congruent triangles to show that specific things are congruent, this is going to be most likely your final step. Okay, and you're going to see this as we're going to see that proving specific things congruent here in pictures. We often need triangles here, and we'll just go ahead and plan it that way, okay?